I want to talk about 6 things that I've learned from entrepreneurship that apply to filmmaking as well, and also obviously things that I'm still learning about. And pretty much all 6 of these, I feel like I learned a lot more about or at a deeper level during the filmmaking process. Especially this last film that was an indie film. It was very intense, it was quick, and I was wearing multiple hats like many producers do when they're doing an indie film. So I want to share some of those lessons and kind of how they relate to entrepreneurship, but mainly how they apply to filmmaking and why they're important. Let's start with number one. So number one is hire the right people. This is a really obvious one. I mean, most of these are somewhat obvious if you think about it. But hire the right people is really like maybe the most important part in my opinion. Because if you don't hire the right people, you don't have a chance for a good movie. If you hire the wrong director, the movie's gonna be bad. It's gonna turn into something that you didn't want or you didn't expect. Just overall, it's not gonna be good. The director affects everything. It's pretty much when the movie's going, it's his vision completely. Also, you have input and everything, but he's the one running the show during filmmaking. He's choosing which shots he wants. He's giving the actors notes. So it affects everything. It affects how the movie looks visually. I mean, obviously the DP is doing a lot, but is the primary one, but obviously the director is affecting that a lot. And it affects the acting performances a lot, pretty much the most, because he's giving notes, he's telling them exactly what he wants. He's the one that's telling the actors what tone this should be, how this plays into the story, what he's looking for. So if you hire the wrong director, you're pretty much screwed. So that's the number one most important hire. But it applies to all the positions, because if you hire the wrong, let's say the wrong DP, director of photography, then you might have a very well acted movie, but visually it's not gonna look great. It's not going to be great. So the movie's not going to be great. So there's a lot. The thing about filmmaking compared to entrepreneurship is there's not a lot of room for mistakes. In entrepreneurship, you have a longer time because you have time to fix things. There's not as much of a time limit. So if you do a wrong hire, you can fire them, you can rehire, whatever. You can learn as you go a lot longer and make a little bit more mistakes. It's a little bit more okay in that way. Filmmaking, you don't have very much room. You don't have much room to make mistakes. You are the wrong person, and it's like, yeah, technically you can replace someone and it happens, but even that, it's a mess. It's messy to have to replace someone last minute or during a shoot. That's really tough. Imagine you have to replace the DP during a shoot and he shot 7 days and now you have to find another DP. It's like, okay, well, you have to reshoot everything then, right? Because this other DP has a different visual. So you can see how it's way more important to really hire the wrong person. In entrepreneurship, in business, a lot of times the lesson is hire fast and fire fast, because you want to quickly see. A lot of people are good at interviews, so you want to quickly see, is this person good? Okay, it's not. Okay, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. This isn't working, let's move on. Like, we have to fire them. You can do that in business, and you have to get the right people. You have to get A players, basically. In filmmaking, I think you should take more time than you do in business. You should take multiple meetings. You should really get to know them. You should do your homework on them. And even then, you're not guaranteed, obviously. That's the hard part. But you should do everything you can to hire the right people, especially in the key positions like director, producer, DP. And honestly, all the positions are important, because the thing about hiring the right people is it affects your whole on-set chemistry, and then it affects how hard people work. It affects how creatively people work. Because even if you hire a good director, for example, and he has a bad attitude, or he's a bit of a bully, or whatever, or he's toxic, whatever it is, then that's going to create really bad morale. People aren't going to want to work hard for him. And in indie filmmaking, most people aren't getting paid a lot. So if you're not getting paid a lot, the environment better be good to motivate you to keep going, to want to be part of something bigger than you. That's why most people want to make movies. They want to be part of something bigger than them. They want to create something beautiful, a beautiful movie, a beautiful piece of art. So you got to hire the right people because you want a good environment. So it's not just about hiring the most talented people. You need to make sure you're hiring for attitude as well. I think when we when we made this movie, that's something that I looked out for a lot, is hiring for attitude. We even took some people that were not as experienced as other people because they just seemed to have a better attitude, a higher energy, for example. And obviously this is something you mainly learn from experience from hiring, because initially you're definitely going to make mistakes. Even this movie, like, obviously there were things that I feel like I sometimes could have done better. You're always going to feel that. But overall, I feel like we had a pretty good environment. We had a really good environment, and a lot of people talked about that on the movie set. They were like, oh, this is such a fun environment. We had such a great time. And that doesn't guarantee a good movie, obviously, but at least that's a good environment. That's step one. You have the right environment for people to want to work, to be creative, to give them that freedom. So that's super important, to hire the right person, and that's very similar to entrepreneurship. Like, without the right people, very hard to build a business, to make it grow, to make sure that's sustainable. So make sure that you hire the right person. Number 2 is problem solving. This is a skill that's equally important in any business that you're starting or filmmaking. It's really important. And really, there's a lot of positions, almost all the positions, you need to be good at problem solving. That's something you should also look out for when you're hiring, is their problem solving abilities. There's different ways to test that out, obviously, or to ask about that. Like a simple one, and I'll go more in depth in this in another video about hiring, but a very simple thing is just for them to give you an example of a time that an unexpected problem happened and how they problem solved it. So that, like, even what they choose to talk about and how they talk about will tell you a lot more about that person. But problem solving is huge. Every film you're gonna have problems. We had problems, especially indie filmmaking. You're gonna have even more problems because you're on a limited budget, or you don't even have enough budget. So you need to make everything fit within the parameters. So you're definitely going to have problems, and they could be logistical. So you need to figure out, for example, let's say you had a scene planned that day, and all of a sudden it starts pouring rain the whole day. How do you solve that? What's the fix? Do you change the scene to the next day? Do you flip days? Do you change the scene? Do you rewrite something? There's a lot of ways to solve it, but you need to figure that out quickly. You can't be spending hours on this and then wasting a whole day or even half a day or even a little bit of time. You need to move quick. The problem solving needs to happen quickly. And then there's also people problem solving, which is huge, especially I noticed in filmmaking. That's what I noticed more than maybe even in business in that way, is that you're dealing with a variety of personalities in filmmaking. I'd say more than in business in some ways, because in business there's a lot more similar people, in my opinion, at least from what I've worked with and who I've worked with. Filmmaking, there's a wide range of people, and there's a lot of, everyone's creative. Like, most people in filmmaking are creative, they're artists. And if you're an artist and you're a creative person, in general you have a higher sensitivity, because that's what usually makes a great artist, is more sensitivity, wider range of emotions. Same with actors, a wider range of emotions. Sensitivity, and that's not a bad thing. Sensitivity is a good thing. I think sensitivity creates good art. So you need that, and you need to foster that, and you need to help grow that. That's important. You don't want to squash that. Like, especially if you're a business person, you don't want to just go in there all like logical and everything needs to be logical and business minded, because that's not how you create good art. It is more emotional. So what happens then, there's sometimes more friction between people, people that don't get along, whatever, tempers rise because of the stress. You're working 12, 13, 14, whatever hour days with not a lot of breaks, and it's intense. If someone doesn't get along, you have two people not getting along from the crew or actors or whatever, you need to be able to figure out how to problem solve that, and ideally how to get them getting along again. And if there is a person that you've hired or that's on set that turns out to be a very toxic person, then you need to figure out, either can you still replace that person? If so, even if it's painful, you probably should do that, depending how bad it is, because it will kill your movie. If not, how do you make this work? Let's say you're dealing with a very difficult personality, just someone that you're probably not going to work with again. You need to make it work for that movie. So you need to figure out how to make it work, and that's problem solving. And I guess kind of like a sub point of problem solving is emotional intelligence. In terms of like, how do you become a better problem solver? Obviously experience helps a lot. I feel like that did help me a lot, that I started different businesses, so I was very used to problem solving. So filmmaking to me wasn't that stressful, but there were still new problems. There were definitely a lot of problems that I was like, oh, I could have probably figured that out better or quicker, or in hindsight now there's things I would have done different. And again, I'm sure everyone will always feel that there's things that they could do better, which is good, and you learn and you get better. But it's a skill that you can improve through experience, but you can also read books on emotional intelligence. There's so many out there. Just to like get better at that will help you a lot, because it's very people oriented problem solving. That's what I noticed, is where most of your problem solving skills get used, and what's more difficult, you know what I mean, because you are dealing with people. So I think that's key, and I'd highly recommend either learning that or reading about it, or definitely prioritizing and realizing it's important. And the third point is have a startup mentality. This one's really easy, and in the sense that a lot of people that work on indies know this, you have to wear multiple hats. Like, you're not usually just playing your one role. Like, at higher budgets, you're probably very into your niche or very into your role. And that's good, because you have enough people. You have like a lot of people usually. Indie filmmaking, you don't. Like, a lot of times you don't have enough people. So your producer might be also the line producer, director might also be the DP, who knows? You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people have to play different roles. So I think in that way it's similar to starting a business. Like, a lot of times in a business, if you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a business from nothing. It's just you. So you're playing all the roles. You're the sales agent, you're the social media person, you're the outreach person, you're the appointment setter, you're everything. You're maybe the website builder as well. You're doing everything, and that will translate into filmmaking, because you can't be too proud not to play any role. Like, you need to play every role if you want to get it done. And so in that way, there's a lot of similarities. So definitely have a startup mentality, and that whatever you were hired for, be open to having things that you have to do that were not under your job description. That's what you have to do in indie filmmaking, and also in almost any business if you want to be successful. The fourth point is be open to learning. And this is somewhat similar to the startup mentality thing, except that you want to be able to quickly pick things up. Like, when I started, I didn't know very much about filmmaking at all. I didn't know exactly what the DP did, about lenses, all that type of stuff. So I didn't know a lot of things, and especially producing a movie from start to finish, it's okay for you not to know everything. Like, you don't have to act like you know everything. I think in this industry, there's a lot of people that want to seem confident, want to seem cool and collected, or they want to seem a certain way, like they know what they're doing. And you don't always know what you're doing, and you don't always know everything. So it's better to be open to learning, and be open that you don't know the answer, or you don't know how to do this, and just be willing to learn. There's still a lot of things I don't know, and I'm hoping to learn more. You know what I mean? And I learned a lot in this first movie. But you know, in terms of being open to learning, I think one thing that's super important is just ask a lot of questions. In general, that's good. It's better to ask too many questions, because then everything will be clear to everyone, also to you, and that way nothing gets missed. Usually things get missed or get screwed up with miscommunications. So especially in filmmaking, where you're on a narrow schedule, like, make sure you ask the right questions and you ask a lot of questions. That way you learn as well, and the more you learn about everyone's roles and how they do things and what they need, then the better you will be as a filmmaker, as a producer. So ask a lot of questions, ask how does this work, and don't be afraid to look stupid. Like, it's okay. Like, you're not gonna be stupid. Like, you don't know everything. That's totally okay. You'll get better, but always try to maintain that mentality of like, I don't know everything, there's a lot of things I don't know, and what can I learn here? That's just a good mentality to keep in anything. And the fifth point is obviously treat people well. This one should be super obvious, but it's not an industry that's always known for that, sadly, because there's a lot of egos. There's a lot of people that I think are in it for the wrong reasons. You know, if that's vanity reasons or power or influence, whatever they're in it for. They're like a lot of people that aren't in it for the art or to create the best movie. Some people just want the attention, for example. So there's a lot of different personalities, and also you're going to try to hire the right people, but regardless, you're gonna have different personalities, because even the best people might have a little bit of that, where they're in it for this reason but also this reason. So it's important to keep that in mind. That's okay, you know what I mean? So just again, obviously hiring the right person is before this, because it just makes things easier. But treat people well, realize that people are very different, and figure out what they need, what works for them, how are they, and try to befriend everyone on your set. It blows my mind when there's people that work on their sets and don't talk to almost anyone except maybe the actors and the director or whatever. There's some like weird hierarchy. I would go out of my way to make sure you talk to everyone, you know everyone's name, and you really befriend everyone, because again, the better the environment is, the more free people will be, the more creative people will be, the more energy they will. So when you do ask them to do more, or you need to go past time or in overtime, they're not going to be moaning about it. They're not going to be like, oh man, I want to get out of here. They're going to want to do it because they're invested in the project, and that's what you want. And one of the ways you get people invested in a project, obviously, is, you know, the script, the story. You want them all to love that, obviously. But the other way is to be invested in the team. That's at the end of the day what you're going to remember more than the actual movie, because whatever that turns into, most people are going to remember how they felt on set. What was the experience like? Did they have fun? Were they treated well, with respect? Would they do it again? And this is really important for you, especially if you're starting out, because if you want to have a long career, you're going to work with a lot of people again. It's a big industry in one way, but another way it's not. People talk, a lot of people know each other, you end up working with the same people. You want to work with the same people, especially if you like them, because you build a rapport, you trust them, you're on the same page, you move quicker because you know each other. So that's why a lot of directors, they work with a lot of the same people. There's directors that have worked with one DP most of their career, for example. They get to know each other, they communicate without even talking in a lot of ways. And keep that all in mind. It all starts with treating people well. They'll create a good set and give you a higher chance to make a good movie. One little thing that I want to add on to that is it's very different again than the business world, which I mentioned before. But I personally enjoy that. I find, compared to what I've experienced in business, there's more inspired people in filmmaking. I think that was always really cool, especially crew. Sometimes I was like, wow, that's like, it's a lot of hard work. They're carrying stuff, they're moving stuff. It's 12-hour, 13-hour days, and it's like, it's very undervalued sometimes, especially crew. Definitely treat your crew right, because they're responsible for the movie being good, and they do everything. And a lot of times they do get undervalued. So treat them as well as you can. It's really important. They do a lot. But I like it. I prefer working in that way on set of filmmaking, because I feel like the people are more positive, higher energy, and a lot of people are pursuing their dream, which is just awesome to be around. It's really fun to be around. So make sure you treat people well, because this is their dream, hopefully your dream as well. So don't be one of those people that ruins it for them. And then lastly is simple: take action. Even if you don't know what you're doing completely, just take action. That's the only difference between anyone that does anything and someone that doesn't, is they just move forward with the information that they have. If you have some experience in filmmaking already, great, then obviously that helps, and then move forward and go to your next project, make a movie, whatever. And whatever you don't know, learn on the way, but start taking the first steps. If you're not in filmmaking at all, but you want to be, there's nothing holding you back from that. Like, it's not like, oh, well, I'm not this, or I'm not a creative person in that way. It's like, yeah, you probably do have skills that are very useful for filmmaking, and you don't need to put yourself in any which box. There's no prerequisite in that way. In a lot of ways, no one really knows what they're doing. So just start going, figure it out as you go, and quickly learn, quickly adapt. That's important, because I remember any business that I've started in the past, I didn't know a lot of things. I remember when I started one of my first companies, the car logistics company. I didn't know anything about cars or logistics, like at all. You just start step by step. For that business, it was getting your first client. So what that meant was making sales calls. And so that was step one, and that's what I did. And then when I got my first client, I learned the next steps. So even though it's scary, sometimes it's like, just learn what your next step is and do that well. And then when you get to the next step, learn quickly and then start doing it. You don't need to know every step of the way before you start doing it. Ideally, have a big overview that you know where you're going. But even if you don't, like, just start going, you'll learn on the way. Same for filmmaking. Like, find your script that you want to make, find your director, and just get going. Even if you don't know every step, you'll figure it out on the way. It'll build momentum and it'll keep you going. That's one of the things I learned from this movie as well. Simple thing is sometimes just set your film date. We were developing the script, and the writer was working on, the writer-director, and we hadn't set a film date, and it just felt like it was dragging when we were actually going to shoot. And we obviously had different components that weren't ready, but there was also this thing of like, okay, well, we're not filming soon, so we have time. And sometimes when you're too relaxed about things and you feel like you have time, things don't move at all. Once we set a film date and we put it a couple months further, all of a sudden it made it real, and the work was way more focused because we knew we had a time limit to be ready, and it was easier to get people on board as well because now it's a real thing. You have a start date. So that's one of the things that I definitely learned is like, just start taking action, move forward, even if it's not perfect. Set the date, even if you're not ready yet, even if you don't have everything full, even if you're not fully financed, like set the date and work towards it. Worst case, you have to push it back. But you'll probably get more money and raise more finance by actually setting a date. So keep that in mind, take action, you just have to start. So those are the 6 things that I kind of learned from entrepreneurship and learned more about in filmmaking and have applied to filmmaking. I'll definitely learn more and update as I go in one of the next videos.